Hello, Keith Rucker here at VintageMachinery.org. Guys, today we are back to work over on the 10EE project, and I think I've got the last little bit that needs to be put together on this machine to fire it up and take her for a test run. So I've got the parts and pieces for the tailstock. I took all this apart, we got it cleaned up, repainted it, and it just needs to be put back together, reassembled, set up, properly aligned. And that's going to be on the height as well as the left and in and out to make sure we're not doing a taper. I'm going to go through how to do all that here in a bit as we progress through this. So anyway, I have previously cleaned it up, got the stuff that needs to be painted, and got all the parts and pieces cleaned up on the wire wheel or parts washer, whatever it needed to be done. And now all I got to do is remember how I took it apart and put it back together. Let's get in here and figure this out and get this thing knocked out. So here are all the parts and pieces. We're going to start with the base itself here. This will sit up on the ways and slide back and forth. There's a clamping mechanism that goes on the bottom, and I think we're going to start by kind of getting all that put back together. Again, if I can remember how I took it apart. So let's get in here and take a look at it and see what we can come up with. All right, this ought to help. I remembered I had the parts book for this, and it's got a breakdown of everything in there, so that'll help me kind of remember how it all goes. So let's take a look at this, and then I'm gonna take a look at this, and then we'll start working on getting it back together. All right, this is the base. This is what sits on the ways on the lathe. There's a V-way in the back and a flat way in the front. And on top of that sits the actual top of the casting here. Now, a couple of things to note. First off, there's a slot in here that this slides on from side to side, and I'm going to clean that up real good before we put it back together. But that is for making a side-to-side adjustment on this. There's some screws that you put in here where you can adjust this side to side. You can purposely put a taper in a part by cranking the tailstock out of alignment, or if you need to get it back in alignment, you can just move it back and forth on this slot. So that is one of the adjustments. The other kind of adjustment is the up and down, the height of the tailstock. And when I got the lathe, it had some shims that were installed in here. I highly suspect that these shims were installed at the factory, and that was to get the proper height of the lathe or of the tailstock. Now, I don't know if we're going to need to add some additional shims in here as this tailstock wears. It's going to get lower and lower, so we may have to shim it up a little bit more. It may not have needed to shim at all, although, like I said, I'm pretty sure that Monarch put this shim in here, so it's probably done at the factory. But we're going to just have to put it back together. We may have to take it apart and re-shim it once we kind of start doing some measurements and check things out. And that's something that you just do when you're rebuilding a lathe, that you have to shim it to get it to the right height as it wears. So I'm going to get some Scotch-Brite. I'm going to clean this up real good, and then we'll work on putting it back together. I've just got a little green Scotch-Brite pad. I like to put a little bit of WD-40 in here. I know people say bad things about WD-40, but it's actually a very good cleaner. And displaces water. I find it very helpful for doing exactly this right here. If there's any rust in there, it'll kind of attack that, put a little oil on it, and stop any rust before it gets any worse. So we'll just get that cleaned up good. While I'm at it, I'll just go ahead and hit the whole thing. It's all in, the rest of it's in pretty good shape here. And while we're at it, we'll go ahead and kind of hit the bottom of this as well. Just a little bit of paint got in here. We don't want that in there. That will definitely mess up the leveling. Just kind of scrape that off of there. And I noticed a little bit over here too. I'm going to put a little bit of whey oil kind of down in this slide joint, just to give it a little bit of lubrication. I'm going to put my shims back in here, and same thing over here. Now, kind of holding all this together, there's two bolts that come in, one from one side and one from the other, and you use these to adjust this. So you loosen one up, tighten the other up, and you can kind of slide this back and forth on that slot. And we're typically making very small adjustments with this thing, but you can make those adjustments right there. Let me get that put back in there, and that'll kind of hold this in place as well. All right, that one is tight. And that one's tight. Again, to adjust these, you loosen one up, you tighten the other one up, and it'll pull it one way or the other. Once you get it set, you jam them both in, and it basically holds it in place. And you can make those minor adjustments from side to side. All right. Oh, I will note too, back here on the back, there is a scale right here with 0 and 0, and this is just kind of showing a little bit of a taper on here, so you can kind of line these up, and it's actually lined up pretty close. It needs to come in just a little bit, but it's real close to being right on. We'll adjust that once we get it on the machine, but I will note that you do have that scale there to kind of go by. So we're kind of looking at the bottom of this now, and there's a crank here, a lever here that is used to tighten the tailstock up. This has basically got an eccentric or a cam lobe milled into it, so when you move this, it's basically moving a cam action that fits up onto this piece here that goes down to a clamp in the bottom, and that's basically what kind of sandwiches all this together. So we need to get this kind of put back in. I'm going to come over here, and we got to go ahead and get that piece in there. And then there's also a collar. That's going to be the challenge, is getting both of those in there. All right, I got to figure out how I'm going to do that. I may have to separate these back apart and get that in and kind of drop all this down on top. I think that's what I'm going to have to do. There's just not enough room to do it all. So, all right, I'm going to turn this back up. We're going to take the bolts back out of here. We're going to separate this. We'll get that cam in there and then drop it all back together. Just got to figure it out as you go, guys. So let me get this thing taken back apart again. I got my bolts out. Get that separated back apart. So now we will bring this in. That goes in there. That collar goes in there. A set screw that goes right here that fits up inside that slot there, so I need to get those kind of in line with one another. believe that's this one right here. All right, got that in there. That fits up over the collar there. And there's also a little indentation right there where that set screw engages into. And I think before I do that, I'm going to put a little dab of oil on that. Okay. Now, I think we can put this back together and drop it down through the piece below it. Got this whole thing kind of sitting up on some blocks so that rod can drop down through there. All right, I want to get to the bottom side again, and we will get the clamp in place, and we'll probably go put it on the lathe and finish building it out over there with the top part up here. We're looking at the bottom of this. There are two little guide pins here that screw in to these posts. And I'm just going to go ahead and kind of snug those in place. There are two springs that fit on that, and then this is the clamp that clamps up underneath the bottom of the carriage. There are some countersunk holes in there for the springs to kind of fit down into, and basically that's just spring loaded. It just kind of floats up and down on that, and whenever you loosen this up, the springs will push it out. This is the actual clamping mechanism, and it goes up in here and kind of screws into place. I'm going to go ahead and get it screwed in here. Clamp in. Now that's going to fit down over that center section. But before we do, there's two nuts here that kind of sandwich that other piece in place. This is how you tighten it up, is by adjusting the height of this. So I'm just going to go ahead and just kind of get it in here right now. We'll have to adjust it once we get it over on the lathe. So how this works is there's the handle back here on the back, and when you push it down, well, if you can see that, let me see. I think you can kind of see it here. So when it's up, it's loose. When you push this handle down, it pulls this down. That's going to tighten your clamp up here. So there's just a little bit of action in there, and that's what tightens and loosens, and we'll have to adjust these bolts or this nuts over here to get it to where it's actually tight on the machine. I think what we want to do now is actually go put this on the lathe, get this adjusted out. I will also note here that once we get this tight, when it squeezes, it's going to pull this down together tight, because that bolt's actually going up into the top half. So when you tighten this up, it's squeezing all this together. So that will kind of work itself out, and then we'll get the quill installed. So let me go get this on the lathe. I'm going to start by just putting, whoops, that's actually the wrong. Need to be on this inside dovetail or way and this flat way here. I'm going to wipe that one off over there. All right, and when I put that down, we're not doing anything, so I need to do some adjustments to the screws up underneath there. Let me work on that, and once I get that adjusted, we'll continue on. So give me a few minutes here to do that, and we'll be back. All right, I'm back here on the back, and I'm just working on doing some adjusting here. Gonna tighten that up. All right, that is probably pretty good. Let me make sure that slides. I'm gonna just take it up ever so slightly, a little bit more. I don't want my handle to bottom out on the bottom. I want it to stop before it reaches bottom. Again, we're sliding fine there. We're locked in place there. So that's pretty good. I'm happy with that. So next thing I want to do here is get the hand wheel put back on the end. So first off, there's a little piece that goes up on here. This is a little graduated piece where you can measure your depth, and you tighten that nut up on the top and you can re-zero it out. So if you're drilling a hole or boring something when it goes a certain depth, it's actually marked in thousandths of an inch. So we'll get our key in here for the hand wheel. And I believe it goes like this. So this is going to go on first. And that'll kind of give us that transition from that diameter to the diameter of the hand wheel. Put the hand wheel up on there. And then the nut goes on the end, and that's the same diameter as the hand wheel. That's going to make it all look a whole lot nicer and work a whole lot nicer. So let me get that tightened up, and we'll, I think, have that knocked out. I want that to be tight where it's snug, but you can still turn the handle. And that's pretty much it right there. There we go. Now up here on the top, there's this little clamp that clamps down. This is the quill lock, so that if you want to lock your quill where it won't move, you tighten that up. Now it moves. Now it's locked. So that's that. So this hole right here is an interesting little piece of history. Now what goes in this little hole is this little piece right here, and it just kind of stays in here. These are often missing because they just kind of fit in there. Now what was this for? Some of you guys will know, some of you guys won't. Back in the old days, in the early days of lathes, before ball bearings were a thing, they didn't have a live center that you could put up here in the headstock when you were turning between centers. I don't think I have a live center with a #2 Morse taper, but this is what I'm talking about. You got a center here, and that's got a ball bearing in there, and that spins. So what you would do is you would put a dead center in here. A dead center, let me see if I got one here. Dead center is like this right here. You would put that in there. That one's a little bit on the large side, but you can kind of see what I'm talking about. But it didn't spin. So when the part was spinning on this, it was just rotating on the center, and that of course caused heat, everything else. So what they did is they put white lead down here, which was a lubricant. You would take a little dab of it, put it on the end of that little dabber right there, and you would put a little bit on the end of your center there. You could use high pressure grease now if you wanted to, or something like that. But it was basically just a little accessory in your headstock, or tailstock rather, to grease or to lubricate a dead center in here. In today's world, where we use live centers, it's pretty much obsolete and just kind of a interesting artifact from the past. But if you ever wondered what that was for, and if I look down in there, it looks like there's some white lead that's dried up still down in there. I probably need to get that out. probably not good for you. Up here in the top, there's a little oil hole, kind of like this one right here. It was messed up. I got it out because the top was missing. I think I may have a replacement I can put in there. Let me look over here and see if I do. I dug around in my stash and I found one. This is a little press-in oiler. Basically, you unscrew the top and there's a little tab in there to keep that from falling out. They don't make these anymore. At least I haven't been able to find them. Every now and then I'll find some old ones, new old stock or someplace, and I'll pick up when I can. I've got a few of these. I got them in a couple of different sizes. This one's 5/16. I think that one's 1/4 of an inch. But they are getting hard to find. Let me see if I can put this one in there. I've only got about 2 or 3 more in this size. I got not a bunch, but I got a few of the 1/4 inch ones. But this one, this 5/16. I don't have very many of them left. All right, that's the oiler. So this oiler lubricates the quill. This oiler down at the bottom, there's a little reservoir in here, and it actually has some ports in here that goes to the ways. So will lubricate the ways in here. And as you move it back and forth, it just kind of, if you keep that full, it will automatically kind of lubricate. All right, I think we got this back together. Now comes the fun part, getting it aligned. I almost forgot one little part here. I've got my way wipers that mount on the front of this. Again, like the ones for the carriage, they have a little piece of kind of rubber and felt in here that kind of wipes along that way and wipes any trash off to kind of keep it from getting up underneath there and scoring the bed up. And the felt kind of keeps the oil sealed up in there as well. And I just got a couple of socket cap screws that we'll put in here to hold that in place. There's one on the front and there's also one on the back, and we'll go ahead and get both of those put on, and I think we'll have the tailstock pretty much done. I also dug around and found a chuck with a number 2 Morse taper that fits it. Had to order a live center for it. I don't have a live center that with a number 2 Morse taper in it, so I got one of those headed my way. All right, that is on, and I'll put the one on the back here as well. Now to put a test bar in here, I'm going to have to put something between centers. So I did dig around and find a number 2 Morse taper dead center. This was one, it's an old one. It's actually made by Morse, number 2 stamped in it. And it had been reground. The tip had been reground. In fact, it had been dipped in the little plastic stuff. So it's got a brand new surface there, but the shank it's on the older side, but it should be good and true. So I'll just put that in there, and we'll use that for our test bar. Again, I got a live center ordered for this, but we'll put this in here for right now. And I need to get a center in on the headstock side and go from there. So on the headstock end, when this lathe was purchased new, it came with a bushing that fit up in here. So this has actually got a taper ground into the spindle. However, the taper that's in here is a Jarno taper. We talked about Morse tapers, and a Jarno taper, it's just a different angle. It's a different taper, and they're a little bit larger. They were commonly used on headstocks. This one happens to be a number 12 Jarno. The Jarno taper stuff is a little bit tougher to find. Most of your more modern machines, they've kind of moved away from using Jarno tapers, but they were pretty common back in the day, kind of like the Morse tapers are still today. So again, number 12 Jarno taper, and it was a bushing that went down to a number 2 Morse taper on the inside. So this bushing would have looked something like this. This is a bushing for a larger lathe. This one doesn't actually fit this, and this one has a number 3 Morse taper that you'd put in there on that end for your center. So that's something I gotta find for this machine if I want to. I mean, there's ways to get around it, and we're going to get around it today, but this bushing is not something that I've been able to find, like a new one or whatever that you can just order. You got to find an old one, and they are difficult to find. I'll just put it that way. And I haven't found one yet, but I am on the lookout for a number 12 Jarno taper to a number 2 Morse taper bushing that would have gone on this 10EE lathe. Now, for right now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a chuck in this. I'm going to just chuck up a piece of metal, and we're just going to turn a center on it. And by doing that, it'll be running true to the machine. I do that all the time over on my other lathe. I'm turning between centers. I just got a piece of stock that I throw in the chuck. Every time I put it in there, I true it up so it's running perfectly true, and it'll work just fine. So that's what we're going to do. But yeah, I am on the lookout for the right bushing to go in here to be able to use it right in the spindle. They also made a drive plate, a dog plate they called it. It would fit up here kind of like a chuck. It looks kind of like a face plate, but it has some slots in it that your lathe dogs, this is a lathe dog, so you would clamp that on your work. They'll go up on the center, and that dog would fit down in that slot on the drive plate, and that would actually drive your work. So I'm also on the lookout for one of those. They're out there. You just got to find them. I have this 6-jaw chuck that fits on this lathe. This has got a D13 cam lock spindle on it. So let me just kind of show you here that the back of the chuck has these studs on it that has a little notch in it, and in here there's a piece that slides up in there, and you turn something and it engages a cam in this little notch, and that pulls the chuck tight and holds it in place. This is a pretty common type of spindle on lathes. They come in different sizes. My bigger Monarchs have a D16. This is a D13. It's just a smaller size. But anyway, you can change your chucks out. This 6-jaw chuck is what they call a true adjust chuck, in that you've got a scroll in here to open and close the jaws, just like you would on a 3-jaw chuck. But there's also some set screws in here where you can adjust this, fine adjust everything, kind of like you do a 4-jaw chuck, so that if you got a little bit of run out in your part and you're doing production work or whatever, you want to be able to move it in and out. One of the notorious things with a scroll chuck like this is that you're almost always going to have a little bit of run out in your part, which is why a lot of people use a 4-jaw chuck. They can dial it in and get it running exactly true. The nice thing about this is that you can dial it in like you do a 4-jaw chuck on the back side, and then you can take parts in and out and repeat and put them back in. And as long as it's in that same range, it should clamp down and run true. So anyway, it's a nice little chuck setup is I guess my whole point. So what I've got here is this is just it's just a piece of hot rolled steel. It's nothing special about it, but it's been turned to that 60-degree center. And what I want to do is I'm going to put this in the lathe, and I'm going to come in here, and I'm actually going to turn my compound on here. We're going to dress this to get it running perfectly true. When I dress it in the chuck, it's probably going to have some run out in it. That's just normal. But when I've actually cut it and machined it on here, it's going to be running dead true to the center. And then I can use this as my center here, since I don't have the bushing to do it through there. And then we're going to put a test bar in there and start testing it. So let's get this set up. And I will note that this will be the first time that I use this lathe to actually use it to cut something. So hopefully everything goes good. And I'm going to loosen up the compound here, and we're going to spin it around. If I can cut that angle, let me get my degrees set here. Right there is where we want. That'll give us a 60-degree included angle. tighten this back up. And I need to flip this around, my cutter around where it can cut. Just put it on there about like that. All right, I think we are set up there. I'm going to turn the lathe on. I'll plug it up first. Go ahead and take that on out to the end. All right, we are cleaned up all the way around now. So that center is right on center with that lathe. So to check the alignment of the tailstock, what I've got here is a precision ground test bar. So this test bar has been ground. It is very precise diameter, and it's also got centers on each end, and everything is ground true to those centers. So I can put this bar into the lathe between my two centers like such. Get that all tightened up. And if the tailstock is in alignment, we can run an indicator across the top and the sides, and that'll tell us if it's high or low or whether it's in or out. So what we're going to do is I'm going to get a test indicator, probably a tenths reading test indicator. We will sweep along. I'm going to do my side to side first because I know that that's a little bit out of alignment, and then we'll check it across the top. We do have adjustments for the side to side. We talked about that before. The up and down would be adjusted by adding or subtracting shims down there in the bottom if needed. So let's see where we're at, and then we'll decide what we need to do. So I'm going to start up here at the headstock end because this is going to stay fixed. We're going to be adjusting down here, and that way I can basically zero things in and get them adjusted out. So I've got it down as far down the test bar as I can go. I'm going to move the indicator in, and I'm just going to zero it out right there. This is the tenths reading indicator, so a 10,000th of an inch, 0.0001 inches is every line on here. The numbers are thousandths of an inch. And I'm going to crank it down to the tailstock end. I fully expect this to be out because it has not been adjusted at all. We just put it back together. So let's crank down, and yeah, it's dropping off very fast. And it's fine. I've actually got a gap in there, so when I get down to this end, what I need to do is adjust this end so that I'm just basically touching that. If I take this to 0, it ought to be real close. So let me go get some wrenches, and we'll start adjusting the tailstock toward the indicator. So I've got to move it toward me. So what I need to do first is I need to loosen the nut on the back because it's going to have room. Basically, when you get this set, you tighten them both up and they kind of hold each other in place. So I'm just going to back it off a good little bit, and now this bolt on the front, I can screw it and it should start pulling the tailstock toward me. And again, I'm just going to do that until we make contact up there. All right, so we're starting to move on the indicator. So I'm going to come around to 0 down there. All right, I went a little bit too far, but I'm probably going to have to make some fine adjustments. So let me sweep back down through here. That little tick is just the movement in the rack and pinion on this. So I'm going to re-zero that. And it's still climbing out just a little bit. We're only about a thou out though. I mean, that dial on there is deceiving because there's such a large movement on it, but we're only really moving at about 1/1000th of an inch. All right, so we're back to 0 again. And we're on 0 there. Again, there's about a 1/2 thou of a tick in this thing. I'm gonna zero it out on the upside of that. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna tighten the one on the back, and that will probably pull it just a little bit back out, but we are, like I said, we're within 1/1000th of an inch here. All right, back to 0. And we got about a 1/2 thou from one end to the other, and that's just the rack in the cross slide here, so nothing really we can do about that. All right, that's good enough. I'm gonna put it across the top now and check and see that and see if we need to shim it. Hopefully we won't, but we'll see. All right, we're on the top again. I'm gonna zero out. And we're about 2.5 thousandths, and that is 2.5 thousandths low. Just looking at the way my indicator moves. So basically what this is saying is that we need to raise this up about 2.5 thousandths to get it kind of back where it needed to be. The shim that was in here, I did measure it. It was 4 thousandths thick. We need about another 2.5 thou. And here's my thinking on what we're going to do. I'm going to add a 3/1000th shim in here. That's going to potentially make it just a little bit on the high side. But when you're doing a tailstock, it is, and I talked about this in a previous video, you know, anticipating wear. As this tailstock moves back and forth, it's going to drop down. It's going to sink down as the bottom of the tailstock wears. So, you know, we're going to be off by 1/2 thou. I would rather be a 1/2 thousandths high, because as we use this machine, it's going to settle in, get on exactly right, and then start dropping down low. You know, is 2.5 thousandths in the height going to make a huge difference in anything? Probably not. I mean, honestly, it may not even be worth doing with, but we're going to anyway, just because I think we can. I've got some 3/1000 shim stock. I think what we'll do is we'll just kind of take this thing, loosen it up, we'll pick it up, put some shim stock back in there, clamp it back down, and I'll probably have to redo my sides again because it's going to take it out of adjustment whenever we kind of lift this up. But we'll put a little shim in there all the way around. I'll probably put 4 little pieces in there, clamp it back down, and we'll repeat this process and see where we're at. And I'm just going to go ahead and I'll start putting the shim in, but then I'll get it all set back up and we'll check it out. All right, let's do it. Loosen that up. And I'm probably going to have to loosen up these screws on the side that we just adjusted. Got some shim stock here, some little small pieces of shim. All right, so this shim stock is 3/1000ths thick. I'm going to get 4 of these out, and we'll put basically 1 in all 4 corners. Actually, I think I'm going to cut one in half because that's going to be too wide for the front. But we'll get those and shim it up. Again, I'm just going to take some 10 snips here. I'm going to cut one of these shims in half. And now I got two of them, one that I can put on the front side, and then we'll do the same thing. I'll probably just put a whole shim back here in these backs. One on the front, one on the back. Put our shim in. Put that one in there. Put one in that front corner. Pick the back end up a little bit. Put one on each side here. Now when I clamp it back down there, that's going to tighten that back up. I'm going to put the test bar back in. I'll get everything swept in. We'll check it out again. So I came back in, I swept the sides again. It was out by about a half a thou. I adjusted that out, got it tightened up, and then we swept the top. And as you can see, as we expected, we put a 3000 shim. It was at 2.5. So now we're about, it's about 4/10 high on this end. So just a little less than a half a thou high. Again, not a problem at all. That change in height is not going to be an issue, and a half a thou is not going to be an issue. So, and it will wear down as the machine wears. So our tailstock is set up. Now I will note on this side-to-side adjustment, you can actually adjust your tailstock on a machine and cut a taper. So if you don't have a taper attachment, you just got a small taper you need to cut, you can actually just move the tailstock in and out, turning between centers like this, and you can actually cut a taper and set it up that way. It's a really nice little feature to be able to do that. And if you ever find yourself in a situation where you're turning something long and it is turning a taper, you can actually adjust your tailstock and fix it. And sometimes if you have a machine that has some wear in the bed where it's not turning perfectly parallel, particularly in certain places, you can, depending on the length that you're cutting and where the wear is in your machine, you can kind of tweak your tailstock. And for that individual part, you may have to tweak it again on the next part. But if you got a machine that's got some wear in it, you can adjust that tailstock a lot of times. If you got a real tight tolerance on a long shaft that's turning a taper, turning smaller on one end than the other, you can adjust your tailstock often and kind of, maybe not make it perfect, but make it better. All right, we got this tailstock set up. And just like that, guys, our Monarch 10EE lathe, I believe, is ready for the prime time. I think it's ready to be used. There is one thing I've got to do, and this is going to be something I do off camera, and I'm going to have to get on the phone with John, the guy that helped me out with the electronic drive conversion. And I want to do some turning on the lathe under a load, and we're probably going to have to make a few little tweaks to the electronics just to make sure everything's running right. We've got it running really nice when it's just running idling, but I want to get some measurements on the electrical stuff, and there's some little potentiometers, pots on the drives and stuff where you can kind of fine tune some things. We got some tests that we need to run, again, under a load, making a cut to make sure it's working good, but I think this lathe is ready to go. And coming up soon, after I kind of get my electrical drive stuff finished up and tweaked, we'll do a little video and kind of give it a good test run. Check it out in a bunch of different ways and make sure everything's working good. But I think we got a winner here. I think this is going to be a nice little lathe and a nice addition to the shop. These Monarch 10EE lathes are precision tool room lathes. As we have found as we have gone through this one, Appears to have little wear in it, which means it probably didn't ever see a whole lot of use. I know I can't remember, I think that this came out of a maintenance shop for a big company, so it wasn't like this lathe was being used on a daily basis in production service. It was kind of just used as needed in a maintenance shop. So it probably saw a pretty sheltered life and didn't see a whole lot of use over the years based on the amount of wear that we're seeing in it. So anyway, I'm really excited. This is going to be a really nice addition to the shop. There are some other things I want to do. I think I'm going to put a backsplash on this lathe. I'm going to fabricate something go out there to keep the chips from going up against the wall, and probably put a little tool holder in there for my Aloris tools to sit on. I'm going to probably install a digital readout on it, just because I like having a digital readout on lathe. It's just a nice little accessory. So there are a few little things that I'm going to be doing to it, but it's ready to be used as is. And with that, guys, that's a wrap. As always, thanks so much for watching. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Those thumbs up and comments are always greatly appreciated. Hit that bell icon over to get notifications when new videos are posted. And as always, a big, huge thank you to those who support the site financially through Patreon, PayPal, and through YouTube memberships. That also helps out a lot, and I really do appreciate you guys that are doing that for me. And with that, guys, we're going to get out of here. We'll catch you on the next video. Again, as always, thanks for watching.